So I wanted to begin by, you could either do this just to take 30 seconds and think about it, or you could share it with the person next to you. So here is the question. Have you ever had a second chance in life? And I don't mean a small one, not like we'll try again tomorrow, but the second chance that deep down maybe you thought you didn't deserve. And on the other side of that question, have you ever been the person who gave someone else a second chance? Not because they earned it, not because it was easy, but because something in your heart told you that you had to do it. So I want you to think about that. Let's take 30 seconds or a minute. You could either do it silently or you could share with the person next to you. And I'm not going to ask you to share, but for those who did share, just to think about those situations. And if you did, just to kind of bring yourself into that mindset, because that is where Judah is in our parsha. But I have to go back a little bit to talk about how did Judah get to this point. We have to go back to Parshat Vayeshev, which was a number of weeks ago. What happens at Parshat Vayeshev? The brothers sell their brother Joseph to the Ishmaelites or the Midianites, whomever. There's a whole thing about that, but they sell him. But what do they want to do first? Kill him. Who stops them from killing him? Judah. Actually, who's first? Reuben. Yeah, so Reuben says, throw him in the pit. But he doesn't know how to deal with him. What are we going to do once we throw him in the pit? We let him starve to death? Basically says, the blood shouldn't be in our hands. And then Judah steps forward. What does Judah say? He says, not only are we going to throw him in the pit, what we're going to do is, we're going to sell him to the Ishmaelites. And then, so he's alive, and we're off the hook. Not exactly good brotherhood, right? And he's the nice one. Keep it like that. Now we see, what do they say? The chickens came home to roost. In a very real sense, Judah is there. He doesn't know who Joseph is. And he approaches him. Vayigash elav Yehuda. And that is where, as we read, Judah gets his second chance. He takes responsibility for what he did. He talks about his brother. And then the story begins. But there's a second person who gets a second chance. Who's that second person? Joseph. Joseph seeks redemption also. In last week's parsha, Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize them. And he seemingly puts them through psychological torture. But the question is, why does Joseph do this? Has Joseph changed or not? Is he still that boy who is trying to get favor? Is he trying to say, I'm better than them through this? Nechama Leibovich, the well-known biblical commentator of the 20th century, she gleans another answer from this. She says that Joseph put his brothers through this ideal in order to give them an opportunity to do tshuva, to repent. And Maimonides, what does Rambam teaches us? How do you know when you're fully repentant? When you're in the same exact situation and you don't do what you did before. And what is the situation? Judah has Benjamin. And he says, take me instead. He refuses to throw Benjamin in the pit. That's his redemptive moment. But Joseph also has a redemptive moment. It shows here in this line, he says, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. Here we see this redemptive moment of Joseph. We have two brothers who took the greatest leaps of their lives in the form of dialogue, talking to each other. Tshuva is performed, forgiveness, atonement is given. And I thought about other stories in our tradition. When one moment changes everything. In the Talmud, there's a story of Rabbi Hananiah ben Tradion. He was a rabbi in the Second Temple period, one of the famous martyrs that were killed that we learn about, that we read about on Yom Kippur during the martyrology service. How did he die? How was he executed? The executioner, anyone know what an executioner is called in Roman? You get a special candy if you get the answer. Anyone know? Okay. It's called kaltstoniri. Kaltstoniri, that is an executioner. A Roman executioner, he sees Tredion's faith. And he says, if I increase the fire and remove the wool, because they surrounded him in a Sefer Torah, and they put wool there, they put him on fire. And they put wool there. Why? Die slowly. So he says, if I increase the fire, remove the wool so that you die, will you take me to Olam Haba with you? And Rabbi Hananiah says, yes. And the executioner ends the rabbi's torture. And in the process, he himself is engulfed in flames. And so the Talmud says that this man, koneh et olamo b'sha'a echad, that he acquired a place for himself in the world to come because of one moment, an act in 1 second. Joseph and his brothers and Rabbi Hananiah and the executioner teach us that no matter how low we are in the pit, one act of righteousness can redeem us. We can come back from even the worst. Judah does this by giving life to his brother Benjamin, putting himself above his brothers. The executioner does this by putting his own life, gives up his own life in the process to end the torture of Rabbi Hananiah. And I think about that often, but actually in a different way, because there's a thing he says, can you give me a life in the world to come? And this idea of he acquired his world in one moment. What is his world? What world is he receiving in that one moment? It could mean heaven. It could mean the world to come. Or it could be that this person changed the trajectory of his life and his memory by doing this one thing. That he changed his world and the world of everyone around him. And I look at this as a way of the second chances that we receive in life. They're opportunities for us to right wrongs, to change the trajectory and change our worlds. Now, Ashkenazim, we name our children after those we've lost. Not only to honor their memory, but as I thought about this, to give that person a second chance in the world. To bring a piece of them into the promised land that is the future. And if you share your stories about that person with your loved ones, with the person they're named after, the descendants will walk with their ancestors with that name. And the person who's passed can acquire a new world. Not just in Olam Haba, but here on earth. I want to talk about 2 second chances from some of my ancestors. And I want to thank them because without those second chances, I wouldn't be here today. This week we marked the passing of Richard Solom, who is my father-in-law Murray's big brother. And I thought about this because I thought about when we were there about his life and how he got there. And because without Richard's parents, Harry and Thelma, my wife and my children would not be standing here today. And probably, let's face it, not me either. Harry and Thelma could not conceive children, but they were determined to bring life into the world. How many people, when they get that terrible news They give up. They say, we're going to do something else. But they decided to adopt children. And not only that, to bring them up in the Jewish faith, to give them a Jewish education. And without that second chance, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And that's why we named our son Harrison after his great-grandfather Harry. And there's another second chance that I want to share. Today we were supposed to name my niece. Unfortunately, the flu is going around. But as my father explained, she is named Raquel, but her Hebrew name is Rachel. And that is after our beloved mother. And I thought about how my mother came to be. My grandfather, Avram, was born in Poland in 1913. And he had a rough childhood. He only went to second grade. He became a tailor's apprentice at second grade in Warsaw, moved away from his family. If you think we give our kids too much independence now, think about it back then. But after the Germans invaded Poland, he became one of the first prisoners in Auschwitz. And that's where he spent the duration of the war. But what we didn't know was something that came years later. And it was when my aunt had her second child, her first son, and my grandfather called her. And he said, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to name your first son Betzalel. And she said, why? Who is Betzalel? And he said, that's the name of my son who was murdered in Auschwitz. He had never told us, never told the family that he had a family before the war. And it was at that moment when she told me that story that I decided to name our firstborn son, Avraham, after my grandfather, Abraham. Because it was the courage that he had, not just in surviving Auschwitz 4 years, but in taking those next steps forward and creating Jewish life again. And he taught us that survival is not enough. We have to dream for the future and journey forward. We believe in giving our loved ones a second chance in this world. Rabbi Daniel Hartman, who is the head of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Israel, he said, the deepest lesson of the Holocaust is in the responsibility it places on all of our shoulders. As Jews, we're all survivors. As a people who survived, we did not choose the path of bitterness and despair. We chose the path of recommitment to life, its challenges, opportunities, and responsibilities. When we remember the Holocaust and all of our Jewish tragedies, we mourn those who died and give new respect to those who survived and the ways they survived, and commit ourselves to walking in their path with their names. Without Judah's second chance, we wouldn't be here today. Remember, we're not called the Josephites. We're called the Jews. And who are we named after? Judah, Yehudah. And I want to return to where we began. Remember, I asked you to think about a second chance you had in life? Not a small kind, not a convenient one, but the kind that saved you. And maybe you gave someone else a second chance. Because Judah did. Joseph did. The executioner did. My wife's grandparents, Harry and Thelma, did. And my grandfather, Avram, did the same. And it teaches us that our ancestors, they did this time and time again, choosing life over despair, future over bitterness, and rebuilding over retreat. And now the question is ours. Who in your life is waiting for you to step forward like Judah? Who is hoping you will see them not for who they were, but for who they are trying to become? And what part of your story is still waiting for its second chance? Judaism, we are not a perfect people, the Jewish people. That's for sure. But we believe in tshuva. We believe in repair. And we believe that no pit is too deep, no past too heavy, and no moment too late. And maybe that's why we're still here. Not because we were spared the darkness, but because like Judah and Joseph and our parents and our grandparents, we kept walking forward together. May we all be worthy of the second chances that we have been given. And may we all have the courage to give them to others, both in this world and the world to come. And let us say, Amen. So I want to thank you all. We're going to now call up those who have the honors for our prayer for our congregation, state of Israel, the country. If you have those honors, yes, so please come forward at this time.